One of the most interesting aspects of the 78 RPM channel, the questions and comments I receive after I post a video. Today, we're going to look at frequently asked questions on the 78 RPM channel. Hello, and welcome to the 78 RPM channel. Whether you're new to 78s or an advanced collector, this is your source for information, research, and music about 78 RPM records, cylinders, and radio transcriptions. Hey gang, welcome back to the 78 RPM channel. I have been compiling a list of the questions that you guys ask so that I can get around to answering them eventually. And today we're going to dive into that a little bit. So I've picked some of the questions I most frequently receive. I'm going to at least take a shot at answering a few of them. Without a doubt, the most frequently asked question I receive, what is the intro music? When I started putting together the channel, I wanted some guitar-based blues music to just kind of provide a nice little background to the intro. But you have to remember, guitar-based blues music is pretty popular, so I had to find something that wouldn't hit a copyright match as well as being entertaining, and that's why I eventually ended up with this. This is Ame no Blues by Awe no Riko on Columbia 29761. It's a Japanese tune. It's got a nice guitar background with a pretty good blues treatment, both guitar and vocally. Now, I have since found out that Nipponophone of Nippon Columbia Company Limited has re-released this on a reissue, so we'll see if I'm able to leave it up for much longer. But for those of you who have asked, here is a little bit more of the theme music. The next question, and I get this one a lot, will you do a video about the process of grading records? No chance. Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. Because there are just way too many philosophies of grading records, and there are way too many record grading systems. I can assure you that whichever system that John Q. Public chooses to grade his records is the only system that anyone should use, and they will call anybody who uses another system a complete idiot. It's not constructive, it's not helpful, but if you're online for any period of time, you're going to run into that. People think their way of grading records is 100% the best, and there are no other options. One thing I encourage people to do is if you buy records online, the basic rule is that you need to know the system of whomever you're buying from. For instance, 78rpm.com, Kurt Knox auction catalogs. He's been doing this for over 30 years, and he has a pretty good reputation for conservative grading. But there is a downside to his grading system, and that is he kind of uses his own grading system, which he developed. So you can't take his V- grade and look at somebody else's V- grade and assume you're getting the same thing. Buying from someone like John Tefteller means not only checking out his grading system, but realizing that he has decades of experience and reputation that goes into his grading. So if someone else decides to use John Tefteller's grading system, that doesn't mean that that person's V+ is going to be the same as John Tefteller's V+. The vintage Jazz Mart grading scale is widely used by a lot of people who buy and sell online. So in theory, that should help you conceptualize the wear and damage on a record without actually seeing the record. However, because it's used by hundreds of reputable dealers, it's also used by hundreds of people who have no idea how to grade a record. It makes buying online kind of a crapshoot unless you're buying from someone you trust. You also have to take a look at what people's philosophy of grading is. If I give you a brand new record that has never been played, that has a little 1-inch lamb crack on the edge of it, is that an E plus or an M minus record with a 1-inch lamb crack? Or is that a VG record because it has a lamb crack? Some people won't grade a record that has a lamb crack at above VG, while the groove itself is literally unplayed. And you have those philosophies, they conflict. So what I encourage everybody to do is come up with a system for which you grade your records, stick to it, and be consistent. As for me, my personal philosophy has a couple of aspects to it. First of all, you grade the groove. You grade the actual sound carrying groove. That's the main thing on a record. Then you add and make note of any damage that is not consistent with the grade of the groove. For instance, if you have an E plus record and it has a scratch, you need to mention that because an E plus record would normally not have a scratch on it. On the other hand, if you have a V condition record and it has a scuff or a scratch on it, you probably don't need to mention that because the fact that the grade is V kind of implies that there is already some wear on that record, so you just kind of expect there to be scuffs and scratches on a V condition record. One other thing I'm going to mention here, and it's probably going to irritate some people because it's going to add work to what you do, but if you are grading records without cleaning them, you are simply guessing. In order to properly see the groove, that groove needs to be cleaned. And that means, yes, you do need to clean your records. I'm sorry, it's going to take more time, but your records will sound better, they will play better, and if you do decide to grade them, your grade will be accurate. If you do ever decide to sell any records, the last thing you want is a reputation as somebody who guesses at the grade. And if you're not cleaning them, you're just guessing. Another question I get a lot is, how do I store my 78s? Right back here. These, as you probably can tell, are IKEA Kallax shelves. And I know a lot of people use them. I also know a lot of people who say, I would never put my valuable records on an IKEA shelf. Well, these are IKEA shelves, but I've made some modifications. Now you can't see this from the angle of the camera, but the corners on these shelves have all been reinforced with metal L brackets. In addition, all the places where the shelves meet the vertical part, every single one of those seams has been reinforced with epoxy. Additionally, these are all bolted securely to wall studs, so there's no chance of this suddenly tilting over or breaking. The last thing you want to do is buy a $250 shelving unit only to have it ruin $20,000 of records. And so you can use these Kallax shelves, but I encourage you, even though some people say it's not necessary, I would encourage you to reinforce the corners and to reinforce the seams where all the parts meet. A lot of people also ask what sleeves I use. I use a bunch of different sleeves, but when I'm putting valuable records on the shelves after I've cleaned them, I usually go with the 78 RPM. Oh, let me get my hand out of the way of the logo here. The Disco Files by Kurt Knock and 78 RPM. There are a lot of reasons why these are a pretty good option, but I can narrow it down to a couple of things. First of all, these are thicker, almost cardboard paper. They are acid-free, they are archival, they are extremely well made. The second thing is that if you order these from 78rpm.com, this is not an ad, I don't get anything for this, but if you order them from 78rpm.com, these archival sleeves are basically the same price as the cheap, crummy, super thin paper sleeves you can order from like envelopesrus.com. The catch is that you have to order them from the 78rpm.com website. If you order Disco Files off Amazon, you're going to pay a lot more than you would for thin paper sleeves. But if you get them from the actual website, these are archival. Great quality sleeves that are used at archives everywhere, and they're basically the same price. So get them from 78rpm.com if you do need some sleeves. If you just want paper sleeves or you want specific colors, then you can go online and find the paper sleeves in whatever color you happen to like, and they're going to be about the same price as these. But for archival stuff, I go with the Discophiles. Someone recently asked me, which videos did you do that you thought were awesome that just didn't do very well? And that was easy. There were two. First of all was a Lightnin' Hopkins video I did. I had a studio outtake of Lightnin' Hopkins performing a completely different version of Shotgun Blues than the one that was released. Didn't do very well. People didn't care, and I was surprised by that because Lightnin' Hopkins is awesome, and that studio outtake version of Shotgun Blues, it was good. The second one was the video of rare performances from the island of Saipan during World War II. The fact that any of that music survived is amazing. I thought it would be pretty cool to play it, and apparently not a lot of people cared. You should care. There's some really good music on that, so go check out that video. Another question I have received from more than one person: why do you call it wax when it's actually shellac? This came in response to my video about shellac recordings that were multicolored. They were splatter wax recordings, or colored wax recordings is what we call them. And the answer to that is, I'm not quite sure why. First of all, your question is accurate. These are not wax records. They're shellac records just like all the others. And I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that originally you were cutting a wax. You were cutting a wax blank in order to make a recording. I'm sure it has something to do with that. But as to why people continue to call it splatter wax, honestly, I don't know. The people who taught me and educated me about 78 RPM records, that's what they called it. I'm assuming the people who taught them, that's what they called it. It's the only answer I've got. I'm going to have to look into it more, but yeah, I don't really know other than the fact that that's what I've always done. Another question I've gotten on a couple of occasions: how do you pronounce vocalion? The answer is vocalion. It's not vocal ion, and it's not vocalion. It's just vocalion. And so now you know. Another question I got recently, somebody noticed it in the background, was this bottle right here, and they wanted to know if that Cotton Club bottle was actually from the original Cotton Club. Turns out it is not. Cotton Club beverage was a regionally or maybe nationally available beverage, and it came in a nice jazz-themed Cotton Club bottle, but in fact it is not from the Cotton Club. Recently, somebody sent me a message saying, what's the deal with the doodles and caricatures? Do you draw? And I think what they were referring to were the caricatures that are often in the background of some of these videos. These caricatures were actually done by Enrico Caruso, the legendary Italian opera tenor, and the man who literally more than anyone else is the reason you know what a Victrola is and you know what a Red Seal Victor record looks like. Hundreds of thousands of people purchased Victrolas or phonographs so that they could listen to the literally tens of millions of Caruso records that were sold. And to be fair, Caruso is still to this day considered by many people to be the greatest Italian opera tenor ever to set foot on stage. But he had a bit of a habit, and his habit was when he was sitting there off to the side while other people were rehearsing or performing, he would doodle. And Caruso's doodles and caricatures, apparently he was pretty good. They ended up in several volumes, several published volumes of his artwork. And most of those were done in Europe, but there were actually a couple that were done in the United States as well. I'm going to look over here. It was by the La Fala publication in the United States. These that are up here are actually Caruso originals, which I believe at some point were probably removed from his original scores, or maybe he just doodled them on the back of a piece of paper. And finally, the other question I get more than any other question other than what is the theme music? Can we see more of the bird? Absolutely not. He's going to sit here for a while we start editing. We'll see you next time on the 78 RPM channel.